everyone, I'm Victoria and welcome to Black Cat Crimes, where we talk about missing people. In this video, we'll be discussing the disappearance of Beverly Ward. Now this is an older case, so there are some areas where some information may conflict, but I'll be sure to point out those areas and kind of highlight the issue around it. And with that, let's get into the 1978 disappearance of Beverly Ann Ward. Beverly was born to Beverly Ann Ward and her father, whose name I was unable to find, on April 19th, 1965. While editing this video, I was able to find the name of Beverly's father. It is Carnell Ward. This bright little girl was born into a large family, which included her married parents, 3 sons, and 5 daughters, who included Beverly. Their family wasn't rich by any means, but they always had what they needed, and they lived comfortably in a middle-class neighborhood. The family were members of the Faith Tabernacle United Pentecostal Church, and it seemed like they were all very involved in their faith. In 1978, not all the children were living at home anymore. Some of them had grown and even had families of their own at this point. The Wards were living in a single-story home at 227 West 11th Street in Junction City, Kansas. In July of 1978, Beverly was now 13 years old. She had beautiful black hair and big brown eyes. She had a few moles on her face and chest, and she actually had a partial bone that grew out of her middle finger and kind of made it look like she had another little partial finger. Beverly was 4'8", and here's where one of the first pieces of information that I see a lot of people question comes into play. Her weight is listed as 54 pounds, which could sound pretty thin and, not a healthy weight at 13 years old, but she was very short. So this could be a typo. It could be she's supposed to be 84 pounds or 94 pounds, something like that. But also at the same time, some full-grown adults who are very short are only, 90 pounds sometimes because they are at a healthy weight for them. So maybe there is a chance that she was 54 pounds and that was just the right weight for her to be because she was only 4'8" at the time. Because you can see in pictures that she doesn't look malnourished or extremely tiny, and her weight is never brought up as a worry in any of the sources I've read by police. So like I said, this could be just a genuine misprint that no one caught and corrected, or that she was just a very small girl at the time. On the night of July 3rd, 1978, there were 4 or 5 people sleeping in the 11th Street home. Now, according to original reporting, there were 3 or 4 people who were in the home that night, but in the last decade, a woman has come forward who was Beverly's friend at the time and shared that she stayed the night on the night of July 3rd. Her presence was never listed in any of the police reports, but there may actually be a reasonable explanation for that as we get further into this story. According to all the sources I've read, she wishes to remain anonymous, and I don't remember if I actually was able to find her name or not because I wrote the script a while back, but because she wishes to remain anonymous, and I believe she's since talked to the police, we're just going to refer to her as the friend in this video. So the people staying in the home that night were Beverly, her mom, 1 or 2 of Beverly's siblings, and this friend that we've just talked about. This friend was a 9-year-old girl who was visiting relatives in the neighborhood at the time, and they'd actually met her and Beverly through church. The girls would often ride bikes and play together, and so they were really excited for the opportunity to have a sleepover because Beverly was about to head for summer camp in the next day or 2. At around 5 a.m. the next morning, there was a loud bang that was heard at the front of the Ward household. The noise came from outside, and all of the people in the home gathered to the front door to just take a peek outside to see what possibly could have made that noise. Well, everybody but one person. 13-year-old Beverly. Her friend was, though, so it seems like at first no one really noticed that Beverly wasn't there. They just were lost in the chaos of trying to figure out what the heck had just happened outside. But when the disturbance across the street settled down, and everybody kind of started looking around, Bernia realized that Beverly wasn't with the group gathered at the front of the house. What was so odd about this, though, was that Beverly and her friend were actually asleep in the same bedroom, just in different beds at the back of the house. So surely if Beverly's friend had heard this noise, it would have woken Beverly up too, right? According to the friend, though, this noise at the front of the house actually hadn't woken her up. Rather, it was one of Beverly's siblings that came in the room to wake her up, and then the two of them just ran out together. Bernia went to Beverly's room at the back of the house to try to wake her daughter and see what was going on, but when she got there, she realized that Beverly wasn't asleep in her bed. And it really only took a few minutes of everyone looking through the house to realize that Beverly wasn't anywhere to be found. For some reason, she just wasn't in the home. In some reports, it stated that Bernia waited till 5:30 p.m. to call and report her daughter missing, but that is just incorrect. She called at 5:30 in the morning, immediately after realizing her daughter wasn't in the home, to report her missing to the police. After Bernia called the police, she called her older children to also tell them Beverly was missing, and they all rushed to the house at the same time as police to try to look for Beverly. And see, this is where I think her friend getting kind of written out of the story in early reports becomes kind of obvious. It seems like there were a lot of people kind of rushing around the house, and there's a very good possibility that maybe her friend was just kind of like sent home to go be out of the way because they have this emergency now to worry about. I'm sure when the police arrived, they did the same thing the family had initially done and taken a quick look around the house, you know, in closets, behind doors, under beds, everywhere, just to absolutely be sure that Beverly was not in the house. But once the young teenager wasn't found, they started talking to the family. It was soon discovered that the screen in the window right above Beverly's bed actually had been cut out, and it was on the ground about 10 feet away from the back of the house. So I want to pause here for a moment to explain the layout of Beverly's family home, because it is fully important to understanding what may have happened to Beverly. The Ward home was a one-story house with a big backyard and no fence around the property. The front of the house was open to the street and the neighborhood with no real privacy. The backyard didn't have much privacy either. As I said, there was no fence, and I believe there was a line of trees behind the backyard. I do know, though, that there was a small tree line to the right side of the house. The back of the house had a single door to the right of this back wall. There are 3 windows to the left of that door. One of those 3 back windows was the window to Beverly's bedroom. Inside Beverly's bedroom, there were 2 twin beds, one just under this exterior window, and that was the bed that Beverly had been sleeping in. And the other bed was near the door to her bedroom, which was the bed her friend slept in on the night of July 3rd. Okay, so back to the morning of July 4th. Police have just found this screen window on the ground several feet away from the back of the house, and as they start looking around, they begin finding more clues as to what may have happened to Beverly. In her room, they found Beverly's bags for summer camp still packed and ready to go just by the door. And as Bernia looked through them, there was nothing that pointed to any clothes being missing, and throughout her room, she wasn't missing any clothes or anything like that. And in fact, the $12 that Beverly had worked so hard to save up so she could take with her to summer camp were still placed right on top of her bags, ready to go with her. All of this, plus the cutout window screen, immediately led Beverly's family and police to believe that she'd been kidnapped, plucked from her very own bed as her family and her friends slept around her. The police began to ask questions of the family in earnest and collect whatever possible evidence they could. Investigators attempted to lift fingerprints from the various parts of the window from which Beverly had been taken. Sadly, though, no fingerprints were found, but the police did remove various parts of the window and took them into evidence along with the window screen. And it became pretty obvious that no one in the family had heard anything the night Beverly was taken. So as I mentioned, there was initially some confusion around who was in the home the night Beverly was taken. And it took years, I do mean years, later before someone realized this, when the friend who stayed with Beverly that night, who was now a grown woman, came forward to begin talking about this in 2014. It was at this point that current investigators would learn that she had been in the home that night. She shared that she remembered being asked questions by the police and that she wasn't actually that much help, obviously because she hadn't woken up or heard anything. Basically, she and Beverly had been chatting in their beds at night, as you do at a sleepover, and then eventually they fell asleep. The next thing she remembers was being woken up by Beverly's sibling, running out of the room, and then coming back only later to realize she wasn't there. Now, when I first saw that investigators had lost track of a witness, especially one who was like in the same bedroom as the victim when they were kidnapped from their own bed, I was stunned. Like, this is crazy. It shouldn't have happened, and we can recognize now that this possibly could have been detrimental to Beverly's case. While now this witness says that she doesn't remember anything, that may not have been true back in the immediate day, week, months after Beverly was taken. I feel like I may know how it happened though, and why there was just so much general confusion about how many people were in the home that night, because that does seem like a very essential detail for police to have originally noted. So if you remember, right after Bernia called the police that morning, she called her older children as well. Given that there are now more people who stayed there the night before, people are coming in and out, they're trying to investigate, they're trying to search for people, and maybe in, her shock, this little girl is like, I don't really know anything, I don't remember what happened, I didn't hear anything. And so instead of keeping her in the way and taking extra time to make sure that they got her name, contact information, so they could contact her later, they just kind of shuffled her into the care of her family, who, remember, lived in the same exact neighborhood. So I'm sure it was easier for both police and the Ward family to just know that she was safely out of the way, so that they didn't have to worry about her while they were looking for Beverly. Plus, it was the 70s. A lot of police work back then was a little bit more lackluster, and a lot of times children were written off completely as witnesses, and their importance in a case was just ignored a lot of the time. And then I think because there were just so many people in the home, and these people who didn't stay the night were called in, and police just lost track of who was there and who wasn't, how many people were in the house, and so they gave more of a general number rather than an actual exact number and who exactly was in the home. It's not great police work, but I think it kind of explains what happened at the time. The friend of Beverly's who stayed the night that night said all she really remembers about that morning is being asked a few quick questions by police and how terrified she was. And I think what's even crazier about all this is how little evidence was left behind at the scene. Nothing was left behind at the scene, and the only things missing from the home were Beverly and the green nightgown and blue underwear she'd worn to bed. Additionally, there were no witnesses inside or outside the home to what happened to Beverly. There are a few reasons why, in my opinion, that such a ballsy kidnapping wouldn't have been witnessed. And part of that is because the police were able to narrow down the timeline of the kidnapping to between 3 and 5 a.m. on July 4th. And so there really aren't a lot of people up and about at that time. Even nowadays, I wake up for work between 4 and 5 a.m. And if I'm out on the road before 6, there's no one out there. Even in a busy city like I live in now, I see maybe 10 people before I get to main highways. So back in the 70s in Kansas, people were not up and hopping at 3 and 5 a.m. There really just aren't a lot of people up at that time of the morning. Another possible hindrance was really that tree line on the right side of the house. While their backyard didn't provide a lot of cover, it might have been just enough to keep a neighbor who may have heard something weird from noticing whatever may have been happening at the back of the house. And funnily enough, I was talking to my mom about this case before I filmed, and one thing that she pointed out about specifically the friends sleeping in the room with Beverly is that kids can sleep hard. They do not get woken up by parents coming into a room to check on them, things like that. Don't get me wrong, it can happen, but lots of kids sleep through someone coming into a room to check on them, whether it's opening a door or something like that. So it's not completely out of the question that a 9-year-old who probably does still have her parents coming in to check on her slept right through someone coming through the window. While the police did immediately believe that Beverly had been kidnapped, they did their due diligence and looked into her family. but they quickly decided that no one in the family was likely involved in her kidnapping. In a 2014 article, Corey Odell, who at the time was a sergeant with the Junction City Police Department, said, "The family was never considered to be suspects. They were forthcoming with information, helpful, and extremely appropriate in terms of the situation." I want to note that Corey Odell is now captain with the investigations unit with the Junction City Police, so though he's listed as a sergeant in the article that I'm referring to, I'm going to be referring to him as captain throughout the rest of this video. Even though there wasn't any real evidence left at the scene and there weren't any witnesses to the suspected abduction, there were actually 3 suspects around the time Beverly had disappeared. To help look into these suspects, the Geary County Sheriff's Office, as well as the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, were brought in to assist at the time of her kidnapping. Their role mostly landed in interviewing people who were out of town, because Junction City was, and kind of still is, a very transient city with people kind of moving in and out and traveling through it. One neighbor shared with police that they'd seen a vehicle in the area around midnight. Now, it's unclear if the neighbor were just able to describe the driver of the car or if they actually knew the person who drove that car. Either way, we know that police found the man who was the owner of the car and were actually able to identify that a second man was in the car on that night. These men were actually determined to be loosely connected to the family. The connection and their being in the area that night automatically made them suspects, though police did acknowledge that the time that they were seen was actually like hours before they had kind of narrowed this abduction window down to. But there are several possibilities. Maybe they were scoping the area out to come back later. Maybe the police timeline was wrong, because I admit there isn't a lot of reporting on like what exactly created that timeline, or maybe the witness statement was wrong. And of course, the most obvious, maybe they weren't involved at all. So these men were actually the first 2 suspects who were looked into in this investigation. And the third suspect was actually a man who lived in the general area of the Ward home. Basically, this man had been seen around, maybe kind of lurking near and around the Ward home in the days and weeks leading up to Beverly's disappearance. And this is really why I wanted to talk about the layout of the Ward house, because it becomes very important when we think about someone lurking around the home in the days and weeks leading up to the abduction. I mean, you have these 3 big windows in a completely open backyard that may not even really have anything at the back of it. It may just kind of be open to a field or even to another neighborhood, and someone might be able to very easily see into the back of the home and start to put together timelines of when people are coming and going, when the house kind of settles down, and who is in which bedroom, which would make it very easy for someone to just come in and quickly get out with Beverly. Captain Odell said about these 3 suspects in the initial interviews done by investigators in 1978, "There's not enough evidence to say either way whether or not they were involved or whether or not they could be ruled out as suspects. From looking through the file, I can say I think the 3 people they focused on and interviewed at the time were the best people to interview at the time. I was impressed with the interviews they conducted." Sadly, though, despite the fact that investigators very immediately jumped on to this being an abduction, the case quickly went cold. They took it seriously from the beginning, but there was just nothing to go on. And in 1985, 7 years after Beverly's abduction and suspected death, Beverly was officially declared dead and a death certificate was issued to her family. Junction City Police wouldn't have any more movement on Beverly's case until the 1990s. And honestly, I don't know what any of this movement is. Apparently, there were some leads that came in that led them in a completely different direction than they looked before, and they tracked down all of these leads, followed them to their logical conclusions, and really found nothing before the case went cold again. And the next development in Beverly's case was in 2014 when the friend who'd stayed the night came forward and began talking about her experience. But that's really all that's happened. According to Captain Odell, in 2014, one thing he was trying to do to discover what happened in Beverly's kidnapping was to look through the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, or VICAP database, for any similar crimes along the Interstate 70 corridor. One of the conflicting details that seems to be kind of important to highlight is that in the original police files, it doesn't state that there was a disturbance across the street from the Ward household, but this detail rather came from Beverly's friend coming forward in 2014. In the 2014 article, Captain Odell speculated that this possibly could have been a disturbance created to take Beverly from her home, but I seriously doubt this is the case. I mean, while this was in the window of when police speculate she may have been taken, every little thing would have had to go right for that to be what happened. Because literally, unless every single little thing happened just as you planned it, it just wouldn't work. To start, we don't know exactly when Beverly was taken. While police did establish that abduction window between 3 and 5 a.m. on July 4th, this disturbance that happened outside was right at 5 a.m., which is also risking those really early morning people who are starting to rise to already be up, and is definitely opening you to more witnesses. Also, if someone was trying to create a disturbance at the front of the house to kind of like push all the possible witnesses forward, that's a huge risk to take. What if nobody wakes up? What if half the people wake up and kind of groggily look around like, what is happening? What if Beverly wakes up and runs to the front of the house? What if Bernia wakes up and instead of running to the front of the house, doesn't know which direction the sound came from and immediately goes to check on all of her children? Even what if everyone woke up and no one went to go see what the sound was? Seriously, for this to be a distraction to take someone from the house, everything would have had to work out perfectly in a specific pattern, and I don't even know how you would predict that. Because let's say you are someone who is close to the family orchestrating this, because that is the only way I think this would work, is if you were someone who had very inside knowledge of the family, and somehow that inside knowledge includes that Beverly is a super hard sleeper, which is just something that I'm completely speculating on if this is the case specifically. Like, I'm a super hard sleeper. I don't wake up at a whole lot, but there are specific sounds that do wake me up. Like, literally, my mom can so much as like touch a bedroom door or like a doorknob to try to quietly close it or look in on me, or, you know, deposit a cat in my bed, and I will wake up instantly. It used to be a major thing. I will sleep through 72 alarm clocks back to back, as loud as they possibly can be, and never budge. But the second a human touches a doorknob that I am on the other side of, I'm up. You would have to have so much inside knowledge of who Beverly is and exactly how the entire household would react to a loud noise. The idea that this was a distraction as of a way to, maybe if they needed to get away, I have trouble gathering how this distraction would have helped the situation, unless they really needed like a getaway moment. But I guess that would be the only way, is someone, but then you have to have multiple people involved, right? Now you have multiple people involved in this abduction, which is certainly possible, but there's just so many things that could have gone wrong by creating a distraction at the front of the house. I think that there are two things that are much more possible in this situation. Either someone who knew the family and was familiar with the layout of their house and the family themselves decided to kidnap Beverly and took her from her bed that night. It may have even been why she didn't react. Either she slept through being taken from the window, or even maybe someone she knew said, hey, there's an emergency, I need you to come with me quietly, and just kind of guided this half-asleep 13-year-old out of the window. And she knew them, so she trusted them and just went. Or there was someone who was prowling around that night and had every intention of taking a girl or woman, someone who was vulnerable, and that open window into the back, they were just prowling around looking for a victim, or maybe even just breaking into a house to steal something if they didn't think anyone was in the home. But instead, they went up to the back of the Ward house, peeked their head in the window, and decided to take Beverly. And they were just more than prepared to do a heinous act in that moment, so they were quiet and got in and out quickly. Okay, I'm freaking myself out because there's a window right here, and now I keep expecting someone to like pop their head up. I'm freaking, it's the middle of the day. This is natural light. I'm freaking myself out for no reason. I do absolutely agree with family and police, though, that Beverly did not leave on her own or voluntarily. I mean, she didn't take her clothes or her money that she'd been saving so diligently. She even invited her friend to stay with her that night, so it's not like she seemed to be planning to sneak out of her own window in the middle of the night. She definitely was taken from her bed that night. Sadly, Bernia passed away before ever learning what happened to her daughter, because we still don't know who took Beverly or why. Beverly's dad, Carnell, also passed away sometime before Bernia passed away, so both of her parents passed without knowing what happened to Beverly. But Beverly still has several siblings who I'm sure would love to see her get justice and know what happened to their sister. Because Beverly was legally declared dead in 1985, there is no statute of limitations on what happened to her, which is believed to be a kidnapping turned homicide. In, I believe, 2018, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children created an age-progressed rendering of what Beverly may have looked like at 53 years old if she was still alive. If Beverly is still out there somewhere today, she would be 59 years old. So if anyone in the area has heard rumors, or you actually have heard of someone's involvement at the time, if you know any information that could help, you could still get Beverly justice. So if you do have any information, please call the Junction City Police Department at 785-762-5912, or you can call the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-THE-LOST. It really is crazy to me that Beverly just seemed to vanish into thin air despite being in a house full of people and literally sleeping in the same room as another person. And no one saw what happened. I know I did mention the thing that like kids are hard sleepers and you can come into a room without them noticing you, but dang, that is crazy luck that this person did not wake up a single person, not even the girl sleeping in the same room as Beverly. And I just mentioned luck, but it really seems like whoever took Beverly knew exactly what they were doing. Maybe with all the progress that is being made with cold cases as of late, something will finally get moving in Beverly's case and someone will be able to help figure out what happened to her. There's a Jane Doe case that I covered on my channel previously that I admit when I was looking into things, I was like, oh, she was found in 1978, yes, in Florida, but the same year, kind of around the same time. And so I actually jumped on it. I was like, oh my gosh, could this be her? But Beverly had very distinct physical traits that the Jane Doe definitely did not have. For instance, there's the extra bone on her middle finger, her moles on her face and chest, and also the fact that Beverly is pretty short. Like I said, there's so much being done with cold cases these days that I am very hopeful that something could be done, but there's just so little evidence to go off of that I think, short of someone knowing what happened or Beverly's body being found, that it's going to be a really hard case to solve. So I really do ask that if anybody has any information whatsoever, has heard rumors, please call the police. But for now, that's all I have for you on this case. I'd love to hear your thoughts and theories in the comments down below. This one's kind of a crazy one, and it's definitely like, how does that even happen? And I'll just say for now, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next time. I am going to be moving this week, so I guess it'll be last week because I'm pre-filming this video so that it will just be ready to go. So next time I see you, I'll be in my new apartment, which I'm very excited about. So thank you for watching, stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!